Well, hello, everybody, and thank you guys for tuning in. I sure do appreciate it. Welcome to episode 1 of Outside My Lane. And I don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of technical stuff happening right now behind the scenes. So I'm not exactly sure. Before we get into this, though, first of all, I want to thank you guys for being here and for giving me a chance to do this with all of the train wrecks that could potentially happen. I do have some help behind the artificial brick wall back here. Dustin is back there. Say hi, Dustin. Hello. So Dustin is back there behind the wall. He's trying to make the magic happen so that I don't have to. He recognized the fact that I was struggling technically and decided to come in and rescue me. Many of you guys out there have seen me do a back deck live, and strangely enough, even some of you guys have actually enjoyed them. And so this has kind of been a natural progression, because every time that I do a back deck live, invariably someone decides to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about. I need to keep my mouth shut. I need to stay in my lane. And so that's kind of been the inspiration for the title of this. And I feel like that as we've all been on lockdown, that there've just been a flood of individuals doing various types of live feeds. There's obviously a lot of musical live feeds going on out there. And I felt like that I didn't need to contribute to that, because there's enough of that right now. I wanted to add something into the live feed landscape that might be a little bit different and something a little outside of what you guys are used to. So I felt like that would be fun. I do want to thank my good friend Brian Jones, who was the lead singer of Lillian Axe for many years, a dear friend. I've known him for a long, long time. And Brian actually is the one that introduced me to this platform, and I got to participate in a roundtable with him. And so he introduced me to StreamYard, and so I want to thank him. I also want to thank Dave Moody, the lead singer of Thunderstruck, who was also an inspiration for this, because I did a conversation with him on Instagram that Geetha watched, and she said, "Hey, Cam, I would like to be a part of one of those things. I think that would be really neat." And so I invited her to be a part of this. Now, before we get into this, a couple of ground rules. Understand, I want everyone to realize that anytime that I do something like this, I am not in any way trying to say that I'm right and you're wrong. What this is, it's a sharing. It's a sharing of point of views. It's a sharing of difference of opinions, because as soon as the conversation goes to shut up, you're stupid, I know what I'm talking about, and you're an idiot, then we never really move the ball forward. So I want us to all come into this conversation not open-minded, because I don't think there's a such thing as being open-minded. I want us to come into this conversation at least recognizing that we all have biases, and those biases are based on our life experience, our environment. The way I see things is going to be different the way that you see things. That doesn't mean that I'm right, you're wrong. It just means that we're different. It just means that we're unique human beings. And so let's go into this conversation and enjoy being together and having a very, very friendly conversation, recognizing that we ourselves are not able to be objective simply because we're human beings. So now, how can you participate? Well, you're participating right now. I'm seeing people come in. I've got Brian is here, Anita is here, and we are going to be able to pop your comments up on the screen. So Dustin, yeah, so right there. So we're going to be able to handle that. So if you come in and you make a comment and it's something that you want to know, we can see them. We're going to pop them up on the screen, hopefully interact with those types of things and have some fun with this. All right. So now it is time to bring on guest number 1 for episode 1. This is Geetha, and she is currently in Sweden right now. Is this true?
Yes, this is true. It's 11 p.m. here.
We've got the Swedish flag in the background in honor of you being here. And so
Thank you.
Now, real quick, what's the weather like in Sweden right now? What are you guys dealing with there?
So it's I would say springtime weather right now. It's
Okay.
Pretty warm during the day and really, really cold still at night and in the early mornings.
So it's going to be similar to what we're experiencing here in America at this point.
Yeah.
For the
Probably
most
a lot warmer during the day where you are, Cam, but I would say like on the west and east coast is probably what they're having right now.
Now, what about where you guys are? Are you all in geographically in a place that experiences like 6 months of daylight, 6 months of darkness, that kind of thing? Are you guys that far north?
Not that many months, but the summer during the summer, I mean, we have really light, long nights. It gets dark about midnight, and then it gets light again already at like 3, 4 in the morning. So, but we
So
don't have the
and
super dark, dark, long, long nights.
now, do you guys get to enjoy like the northern lights and that kind of thing? Do you get to
No,
experience that up there? Okay,
mm-mm,
so you're
no,
not that
no,
far north. In
no.
so you can't say that. Now I know that Sweden has got like a massive coastline. So are
Yes.
you guys? Would you consider yourselves to be like a beach country? I mean, is there a lot of beach activities that take place?
Not like the kind of beaches that we have in like Panama City in Florida, but
Right.
beach activities as far as like boating life. And it's the ocean outside where I live, so spending time on the boat every summer is definitely something that we enjoy.
Now, before we get into your bio, because I want people to know more about you, I think that we need to talk about some really important stuff. Like, first of all, how is ABBA? Are they doing okay?
I have no idea.
A lot of people have been worried about ABBA and the Ace of Base because you
Ah,
know that we got to make sure that ABBA and Ace of Base, our Swedish
right.
rockers, are doing okay. So, have
Well,
you heard any
half
reports?
of
I mean,
ABBA, half of ABBA don't even live here in Sweden, do they?
I don't even know. I just know
I
they're
think
from
I
there.
think
So,
Benny I think Benny and Björn live in the UK or maybe in the States now. I don't know, but
so they're
I have no
sellouts.
idea.
They've sold out. They've sold out Sweden. Are you kidding me? All right. Well, then, and we had this conversation earlier when we were talking, and you answered my question, but I want you to answer for everybody else. So they're in Sweden. Are you guys as big of IKEA maniacs as we are in America?
um, yes, I would say that we are. Yeah, for sure.
I I
Yeah,
didn't know if that was just like
per the
an
painting.
yeah. I didn't know if that was an American phenomenon or if over there in Sweden, if you guys were actually were all about IKEA as well.
Yes, we are definitely. IKEA makes uh, good products for quite cheap.
And you get to
Yeah,
put them together. So
yeah. So that
there's a nice
sucks.
I'm sure that a lot of divorces have occurred based on
Yes.
putting together, the baby
Hmm.
bed and that kind of thing that you
Hmm.
get from IKEA. Well,
Or just
what
a
I want
tiny
to do now,
box.
what or anything, right? Yeah. So what I want to do, and there's probably a lot of people here that are familiar with you because they've seen you on Facebook and they've interacted with you, and they may not even be aware because the way that social networking has brought us all together, made the world smaller. They may not even realize that you are what is it? Not, you're 8 hours away. I mean, time difference. I mean, we are. What time is it there right now?
It's 11:10 p.m.
So here we are. We're at 5 o'clock. A lot of people watching are on Central Time, so it's 4 o'clock. And so I would like to real quick before we get into your profession, let you tell everybody your story because it is unbelievably inspirational. And everybody
Thank
that's
you.
watching right now, believe me, this will be your favorite part of this entire broadcast because this woman is spectacular and her life journey is something that we can all learn from and be inspired by. So I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you.
Start it off. Tell them, give us your background, Gita. Tell us about you.
I will. Thank you. And thank you for having me, Cam. And thank you, everybody,
Absolutely.
for watching. So, yeah, my life started in India in 1979, and I was adopted to Sweden at 5 months old by my two amazing parents, Gunilla and Krister. Um, and they, like many other people, have had trouble having kids, and so they decided to adopt. And I was adopted to the city that I live in now, Stenungsund, which is on the west coast of Sweden. And when I was 4, I got a little brother. His name's Johnny, and he is also adopted from India. And he was 1.5 when he arrived in our home. And I have the most loving parents and the best brother. We're super, super, super tight family. Um, yeah, and like I said, I grew up on the west coast of Sweden, and we lived here until 1989 when I was 10. And my dad got transferred to move us all over to the States. So we moved to Washington State, to Moses Lake, Washington, which is a small town. about 3 hours south of Seattle. And I lived there and went to school until I was about to turn 15. So in 1994, it was time to move again. My dad worked for a Swedish company called Eka Chemicals. They're now owned by Axon Nobel. I'm sure you guys have heard of them. And so he was a senior project manager, and every time they needed to build a new plant, we moved. So in 1994, we moved to the south, to Columbus, Mississippi. And that was quite it was a hard move. Hard because I was a teenager, and also hard because I had never been to the south. And it's quite different. I grew up in a predominantly white country, and I have two white parents, and I am not white and I am not black. And so it was quite hard, actually, moving to the South. It was hard to be accepted. It was hard for people to understand that I had white parents. And it took a while before I settled in. But now I love the South and everything about it. And so, yeah, we stayed in Columbus through my graduation in '97. And I got a scholarship to play tennis to Mississippi University of Women, which is in Columbus. And I played tennis there for 2 years. And then in 1999, the plant in Columbus was finished. And so my parents and my brother moved back to Sweden. And I decided that I didn't want to move back. I was enjoying going to college. I was pre-med, and yeah, I was just having such a good time. So one of my teammates at the W was going to Auburn, and so I decided to apply and got in, and went to Auburn from 1999 until 2001, and that is where I saw the Velcro Pygmies for the first time at the Supper Club um, in '99. And I've actually had some late night meals with them at the Waffle House in Auburn. Um, and yeah, so that was my first Velcro Pygmy experience quite a long time ago now. Uh, After 2 years in Auburn, I decided to move back home to Sweden because it was just way too far to only see my parents and my brother twice a year. And I was quite homesick. So I decided to move back home. And I had been studying like my whole life, never taking a break. And so I felt like I needed to take a little bit of break. And also, unfortunately, when I came home to Sweden, the university here in Gothenburg, they did not want to accept my credits, pre-med credits. They wanted me to start all over. And I felt like I had worked so hard to get where I was. And so, yeah, the wind kind of got knocked out of me. So I decided to do something completely different. So I took a bartending course and decided to be a bartender. And when that course was done, I moved to the UK. And the plan was to be there for like 6 months. But unfortunately, um, English people drink a lot of tea and beer and not a lot of cocktails, which is what I had learned in bartending school. So after like a month and a half, I just decided to go back home to Sweden. It just wasn't my thing. And so that was in 2000, yeah, the fall of 2001. And then in the spring of 2002, I met my husband, Mickey, and still hadn't gone back to school. I was just working at a grocery store and not knowing really what I wanted to do, if I wanted to continue with my pre-med studies or if I wanted to do something else. And my mom is now a retired RN, and she's always absolutely loved her job. So she said, you should apply to nursing school. So I did, and started nursing school in 2003 to become an RN. And here, the nursing school to become an RN is 3 years. So I was done in 2006 with a bachelor's degree. And I started working right away at the hospital that I still work at, Kings River Hospital here on the West Coast. And I started working in orthopedics. And after about 8 years, I decided it was time to do do something else. And so in 2014, I started working in the ICU. In between there, in 2012, Mickey and I got married after being together for 10 years. And like many other couples, I'm sure, after you get married, you start talking about having a family. And we had been together for 10 years. So it was definitely time. I got pregnant in 2013 and almost died in an ectopic pregnancy, which was something that changed my life, our life, everybody's life, a whole lot. And after I recovered from that, in 2014, we got pregnant again and lost our second baby. And yeah, quite the journey, quite hard times for anybody who's been through that. I'm sure you guys know how that feels. And then in the fall of 2014, I got pregnant for a third time. And unfortunately, once again, this was an ectopic pregnancy, which now meant that I anatomically couldn't have kids biologically without IVF. So yeah, a lot of things happened in 2014. I changed jobs, and we lost our third baby, and we decided to start IVF. So we did, and 14 tries later, it was time to give that up. It was just too exhausting for my body. And during this time, I also decided to go back to school to get my master's degree in critical care. So I started that in 2016 while we were doing IVF. And I'm quite proud of myself that I managed to do that, study at the same time, and also work 50%. And I graduated in 2018 in January, and I now have a master's degree in critical care. In the fall of 2017, we decided that it was time to do something else and stop the IVF. It was too hard on me physically, emotionally, on us as a couple, on everybody around us. And we needed a new plan. Adoption has, of course, always been a part of my life because I'm adopted. So we decided that we were going to adopt. And we got extremely lucky, and the process was really fast. So in October of 2018, we went to Mumbai, India, and picked up our daughter, Zoe, who was 9 months then, and who is now 2. And that's just amazing when you've been waiting that long to be a parent. Yeah, amazing. So current situation is that I am a critical care ICU RN at Kings River Hospital. I have a 2-year-old and the same husband. I live in the same place, and I also, on the free time that I have, I'm also a volunteer for the Ectopic Pregnancy Trust, which is a foundation in the UK that helps women and men, people that have suffered from ectopic pregnancies like me. And I'm part of their email and support team. And yeah, so that's where we are now. And as of, March, I'm on the front line battling COVID-19 or Corona. And yeah, that's pretty much been my life for the past couple months.
Wow. So, okay. Well, so at this point, what you have basically done is you have made myself and everyone watching realize just how insignificant they are. What an unbelievably inspirational story. Something that, you know what,
Thank you.
in this crazy time, I think it's important for people to hear that, you know, because we're starting to look at human beings as they are one-dimensional based on their opinion of something. And that's ridiculous. And so I wanted everybody to realize what your journey has been and what an inspiration that can be to them and the things that you've been through. And still, you're beautiful, you're smiling, and you're still, you know, it would be so easy to just throw your hands up with humanity after going through all of that. And instead, you went the other way and decided to put yourself in a situation to help people, which is
Yeah.
just again so unbelievably inspirational. And so I
Thank you.
desperately wanted everybody to hear that. And the
I
comments are
appreciate that.
rolling in.
I
People are
see.
just are loving they're loving your story. So it's really cool. So now,
Thank
all
you,
right.
everyone.
Now that we all know, and now that we're all friendly, and I think everyone's got some tissues and they're wiping the tears away from their eyes. Um, I I want to talk a little bit about what's going on over there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people are aware, but Sweden
Thank you, Cam.
chose to handle this differently than
Yes.
America did. And so, would you mind basically detailing what the Swedish approach was to this, as opposed to what the American approach was to this, and when it all started,
Yes.
and how you guys dealt with it?
Well, so Sweden didn't only take a different approach than America. We also took a different approach than our Scandinavian neighbors, Norway and Denmark. And the biggest thing that we decided not to do was not to have the lockdown that you guys have had. Um, and from the very beginning, I think that was the thing that people have reacted the most to, that leaders of other countries have reacted the most to, people in general, is that Sweden has somehow, um, well, we've gone outside the box. We didn't follow suit. And at the beginning, we were met with a lot of critique for that. And this started, I would say, in the middle of March. And from the very beginning, we didn't have any restrictions. And I can honestly say, I remember your live feed, Cam, the first one that you did in your car when you were so upset about them shutting down the bars and you guys not being able to play, or not having big crowds and stuff. And I remember commenting that I was, I couldn't understand it either. And I don't think any of us, even in healthcare, actually believed or thought that this was going to be anything more than the common flu that we have every year. Many people probably don't know this, but every year in the ICU, we have flu patients that need to be on a ventilator. Quite young patients, often my age or younger, and that's normal. And here it's usually during the winter months, so from like December, January, February. So I think we all thought, um, as a whole country, that it was going to be a bad case of the flu, but I don't think anybody really realized that it was going to be this big. And so yeah, Sweden didn't do anything at the beginning. Um, and then after a shorter time, they decided to have a few restrictions, and they decided to cancel big events like concerts, uh, gatherings, and things like that. And you had to be less than 500 people. But that was pretty much all that they did. And so yeah, that's how it all started, Cam. Is And I think where we got a lot of critique is that we didn't do anything. And we still haven't done as much as many other countries. Norway locked down pretty quickly. Denmark not locked down pretty quickly, and we still have not. There have been more and more restrictions placed on us, but they're not they're not enforced in the way that they have been in other countries. It's more of a recommendation, and um, letting the people take their, or have own responsibility, and trying to follow these guidelines. They have restricted certain things. They have restricted bars and restaurants as to how many people can be in the same location. So 50 is the number now. They are restricting funerals and weddings and parties and all that kind of stuff. No concerts. Restaurants have to move their tables and make sure that people are sitting at the tables and that they're served at the tables. You're not allowed to have people going to the bar to get drinks or to the bar to get food. The waiters have to come to your table so that people aren't interacting, walking back and forth. Um, so restrictions like this. Um, but yeah,
Well,
no lockdown.
Let me ask you this. So, whenever all of this started, did it seem to be more of a scientific approach or a political approach? Did they kind of look at things like, okay, we're going to focus more on a bigger picture public policy, or more on the health of everybody? What do you think motivated those decisions in the beginning?
I think they were political in the beginning, and I think the politicians and our prime minister. I think he probably felt pressure because, especially since our Scandinavian neighbors were doing lockdown and taking drastic measures, and we were not. I think they felt like they had to do something in the beginning, um, and I think what has happened and how it's progressed is that the more scientific and information we're getting from the epidemiologists and um, intensive care unit chief surgeons, like infectious disease doctors, they're on television every day doing press conferences, and are equivalent to the CDC or World Health Organization here in Sweden. Um, they have a press conference every afternoon where they update us on, you know, what is our current situation and what changes are we going to make. And I think now it's definitely about protecting the people, and making sure that everybody's safe. We have had we're not a very big country, but we have had quite high numbers of cases per 100,000, which is how they determine.
Right.
Uh, and We have different regions in Sweden. So Stockholm, which is our capital, it's also the biggest region in Sweden, and they are obviously number one and have been affected the most. And then where I live, the western region, where we have the second largest city in Sweden, Gothenburg, we are number two on the list. And we're not as high as Stockholm because they are in population wise, their region is twice the size of ours. And so, uh, but we're number two. And it's increasing every day. I looked at the numbers today, and from yesterday to today, we had 167 new cases, and where I live, 23. So,
Well, now there, because I mean, we are all inundated. Everybody is with the news, and we all go out there and we look for. And one of the things that is always mentioned about Sweden is they talk about the medical system there as being a socialized system. Is that true, or what is the medical? What is your all's medical system set up so that everybody watching here can once and for all know what Sweden's medical setup is?
well, so we don't have there. We have private clinics now, which we didn't have before. But healthcare in Sweden is pretty much free. We pay high taxes, and for that we get free healthcare. Not free. I mean, you pay it through your taxes. Um, but let's say a night stay in the hospital cost me. I think they billed me $10 for one of the times I was in the hospital per night. So yeah, that's how it works here.
So, based on that, are you seeing? Is Sweden seeing more people? I guess my question is, since it's free, are
Right.
more people rushing to the hospital with a stuffy nose, thinking, "Oh my God, I've got COVID-19," or how are you guys keeping the healthcare systems from being overrun just because it's free? Is there
Right.
anything in place to do that?
No, but so here's the problem is that we are being overrun because Sweden is not a very big country. I can tell you this, just my hospital. I don't work at the hospital in Gothenburg. I'm about 30 minutes north of there, so it's a smaller hospital. We have about 1,500 employees and around 160, 107 patient beds. And usually in the ICU where I work, we have um, we have five uh, ICU beds. What that means is we can have up to five ventilators, and then we also have post-op patients and daily surgeries and stuff like that. But that's our normal amount. And so now they have closed. There are two hospitals in our region that only do um, surgeries during the day. They're not open at night, and all their personnel is now at my hospital in our ICU, pretty much helping us, because we are now uh, able to take 21 ICU patients. They have rebuilt the ICU that I work. They've made different zones where we have a clean and a dirty zone where the COVID-19 patients are. They have put up new doors and walls everywhere. We have created two of our regular wards, that the orthopedic ward and our stroke, half of our stroke unit, they have made into a epidemic ward, where they have put tents outside the ER and also these wards, so the patients come there, and then if they are positive, or you think that they are will be positive, they go there first and are isolated. Um, yeah. So in the beginning, if to answer your question, Kim, in the beginning, we did see people rushing with just a runny nose, but very quickly there was, I think people were really scared from the beginning. Uh, we set up, all the hospitals set up huge tents to be able to take care of the people that were going to be rushing there to have tests. And we saw a rush, but it was a very short period of time, because people are scared to go to the hospital.
Oh
And
yeah, I can imagine.
and unfortunately, one of the huge drawbacks of that is that people who need care don't go to the hospital.
So,
Um,
um, so let me ask you this.
yeah,
We've had a couple of questions pop in that I want to insert into this conversation.
definitely.
But before I do that, we're getting inundated with this hydroxychloroquine situation. What are you guys using? What is someone that is literally treating these individuals? What are you guys doing? Let us know. What is Sweden doing?
So we are treating our ICU patients like we always treat our ICU patients. Uh, they're extremely sick. They're extremely lung sick, and so we're using the same drugs that we usually use, but in much higher dosages. And unfortunately, they require to be on a ventilator for a much, much, much longer time than, like, say, a regular pneumonia or the regular flu. Um, and we're also seeing quite young patients. They talk about the older patients, and yes, the older patients are definitely a risk group for sure, because they are at risk for dying. But that does not mean that we don't have younger patients that are affected, which I think a lot of people are a little bit naive to. They think that the patients that I have in my ICU right now that are on ventilators are all 80, 90 years old, and that is not the case. They are much, much younger. Uh, so we are not
Well,
using what you talked about yet.
okay.
They are now conducting studies in Stockholm. I know that they have tried it on a few patients, from what I understand. Uh, I don't know that we have any results yet. Uh, they they have said that if we can see clear results, that we might also start using it. From what I understand, what they have seen is it's not where it's making people better like this.
Right.
What it's doing is it's cutting down the ICU time, because something people probably don't understand is, so I had somebody say to me the other day, well, if I get sick, you can just put me on a vent. And yeah, putting somebody on a ventilator is easy. You can do that with a healthy person. You just give them enough sedation where they stop breathing, and you put a tube down their throat, and then you can be on a vent. But the problem is what happens to you when you're on a ventilator for 3 to 4 weeks, and how you need 6 months to a year's rehabilitation afterwards. And that's a big problem uh,
Wow.
that we're seeing. Yeah,
Now so let me ask you this, and maybe there's some, interject a little good news here. One of the
right,
things that we keep seeing is that death rate, death rate, death rate. But one of the things that seems to be underreported, in my estimation, might be the survival rate. So
right.
whenever you guys are bringing these people in and they are sick, how successful are you guys being at getting them out of there? I mean, obviously, you guys got to be doing something right.
Yeah, I saw a picture today actually that somebody posted from the biggest hospital that we have here in Sweden, in Stockholm, where they have actually hung flags in the ceiling for the patients that have actually either gone home or at least left the ICU to uh, a ward, meaning that they're feeling better. And so yeah, we definitely have a recovery rate too. And like you said, Cam, they are not reporting it as much as they probably should. Uh, they're also here talking about. How many people are getting sick every day, but there's definitely a recovery rate. Yeah, for sure.
So you guys, I mean, at least that gives you some hope as being out there
Yes, for
battling
sure.
this thing on the front line that what
Yeah.
you're doing. Okay, so let me run to some of my questions here.
Yes.
One of the things that people are really interested in is how has the media over there affected the public perception of what's going on? Obviously, here we've got it going all over the place, and you got neighbors screaming at each other in the streets and that kind of thing. How has the media handled this where you guys are?
Well, so in the very beginning, I think not only the media, but I think a lot of us too, we kind of acted like rebellious teenagers. I think we all felt like, well, we this doesn't affect me. I don't need to do this. I don't need to stay away from my parents, and uh, I don't need to not go to the grocery store. And in the beginning, I think the media, they didn't portray it wrongly. I think that they did what with the information that they were given. I think they did a pretty good job of not alarming people or lying to people about the situation. But very soon, uh, when the doctors and all the people that actually know what they're talking about, the scientists, that the people that I trust, uh, they started saying things, but in not making, they weren't forcing us to do certain things. They weren't, forcing a lockdown. They weren't saying you can't do this. They were giving us recommendations, and I think that has made everybody listen. I think media has actually done a pretty good job of relaying uh, good information. Of course, there's always going to be that one or two reporter in that one channel that doesn't, and there are rumors here and there. And you know, I think the one thing that they've reported a lot here is just like for you guys, everybody's wondering what China was doing back in October and November, and why they didn't release the information that we all think that they were sitting on back then. Um, just the other day, they reported that Japan's leader had been MIA for 3 weeks, and that he was dead. He is not dead. And so, yeah, you're always going to have that, I think, in the media. But I think they've actually done a pretty good job of not alarming people because they want people, because we don't have somebody saying you have to do this. You also have to rely on getting people to realize how dangerous this can be, and following these restrictions. Very early on, Cam, this infectious disease uh, chief doctor said that to survive this, 10% of the population needs to keep interacting with each other to create immunity. And I think that is something that the whole country um, has decided to listen to. I mean, that's, I think, as far as not placing lockdowns and only having restrictions, I think it's because of the fact that he said that. He's also a professor and uh, knew what he was talking about. So I think that's also why they keep having this approach.
Now, let me ask you this. What is the spirit of the average Sweden citizen? So if you told them, hey, you guys got to stay home, would there have been defiance? What is that
Yes.
spirit? Because we're seeing a lot of that in America where it's like, you know what, screw you. I'm free. I'm going to do what I need to do. Would that be the
Yeah.
same over there?
Yeah. And that's honestly, Cam, that's the problem we're having right now is that when the weather started becoming really nice, so Easter weekend, we also saw a extreme rise in how many patients needed hospital care after that weekend. Um, and the numbers just rocketed again. We thought that maybe we had flattened the curve a little bit before that. And after Easter, we've definitely seen a rise. Um, and yeah, it's exactly that because people think, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. And what we're seeing now, unfortunately, is that um, with restaurants and bars opening up their outside seating and stuff like that, people are not doing what they're supposed to. They're not keeping distance from each other. They're going out having lunch and dinners with friends and having wine and beers, and not sitting 1.5 meters away from each other. The recommendation is that you shouldn't uh, interact with anybody that lives outside your own home. So the your own family that you interact with every day. And if you do so, you should stay 1.5 meters away from them inside and outside. The restriction is also, and this is something that they've been very clear from the very beginning, is that grandparents should not be inside with their grandchildren at any time during this, and especially not if they're over 70. Um, they shouldn't go to the grocery store, things like that. The other day, I went 2 days ago, actually, I went down to pick up a package, which our post office is inside one of our biggest grocery stores. And so I knew and this grocery store has been fantastic with opening up earlier for the senior citizens to be able to go shop. And, they have sanitizer everywhere, hand sanitizer everywhere. He makes sure that there are not a lot of people in there at the same time. They have dots on the floor at the registers so that everybody stands a certain distance apart. So I was just going in there to go to the post office, and I could not find a parking spot. It was noon on a Wednesday, and I could not find a parking spot. And I walked in there, and I was so mad and so sad because everybody in there was a senior citizen, the people that we're trying to protect. And I wrote something about it on my Facebook and on their page, and it got a lot of response, of course. But yeah, we're definitely seeing defiance, and it's not just young people; it's older people too.
Let me ask you this, and we've got another question here. The concept, a lot of discussion about the herd immunity, and you just mentioned that. Are you noticing any? I don't know how long that takes to
Right.
develop, but are you noticing that any of that is effective? And are the people that made the decisions for Sweden planning on, when it all runs its course, to be able to look back and say, okay, we took a hit at the beginning, but in the long term, it worked out in our favor? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't think we can see it in the numbers yet, Cam. Um, there's an ICU registry that you can that everybody has access to, where you can day by day see. And we've had a few days where we actually haven't had any new patients admitted. I think it's only 1 or 2 days during this whole thing, and you can see that the curve. I mean, it's on its way up, but it's not maybe as high and that is a high spike as maybe they thought that it would be. For us, they said at the beginning where I live, they said that we were going to get the hit with the most patients and as bad as Stockholm about 3 or 4 weeks after Italy and Spain, which would have been um, at the end of April. And then they said that we were going to get after Stockholm, which is now. And now they're saying that we're probably going to get our peak at the end of May. So statistically, I don't think we can say yet that there is a herd immunity or that it has had effect. Maybe we have been better at keeping the restrictions than we think that we have, and that it doesn't matter that those. I mean, of course, it matters, but maybe people that are not following the restrictions are few enough that it isn't affecting. We have seen a rise down here in patients, of course, but yeah, it's hard to tell now. I do think that one of the things that they talk about here is the dangers of what happens when the lockdown is over, when you start letting everybody out at the same time. And that's my fear too, for you guys and for England and all the other countries too, is that people are going to get super sick, I think.
Now, we've got a question concerning vaccination. How do you feel about the possibility of a vaccination? One of the things that has been brought to my attention and that I've contemplated is that what if there is no cure for this thing? Are we just going to be locked down forever? I mean, at some point, we all have to kind of go back to our lives and sort of damn the torpedoes. And I'm hearing people say, well, there might not be a vaccine. And then there's a lot of people say, well, if there is, I'm certainly not going to take it, because there's a lot of controversy surrounding what vaccines can and can't do.
Right. So, I mean, I guess the question you can ask yourself is, do you take the regular flu vaccine? I don't. I have asthma, and I was recommended not to take it for the past couple of years because a vaccine is a live virus. I am a firm believer, however, in vaccinations when it comes to vaccinating children and other vaccinations as well. And I would have taken it. But with the regular flu, we know that you build, if you've ever had it, I know I had it 6, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And so you do build up antibodies and hopefully an immunity against that. But the flu changes every year. I mean, same year, you can have 3 different strains. So yeah, if they don't find a vaccine yet, then hopefully, I mean, the hope is that there will be some kind of immunity, and hopefully that will happen without hundreds and thousands of people getting super, super sick and dying. And I think that we might definitely have an advantage there because people are still moving around. Even if we're moving around each other, we haven't just been inside. And I believe that I'm a firm believer in that guy that said that 10% of the population needs to move around to create this. Yeah, for sure.
What do you think about people staying at home? And and this is not going to necessarily be Sweden. This would be more your experience in America and having been at an Auburn football game and places like that, where as Americans, we go out, we do things, but everyone that is trapped at home right now, are their immune systems weakening because they're not being exposed to anything? So suddenly when we go out, we're going to be susceptible to viruses and bacteria that we would not have been before, and we might get sick doing other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, medically, I can't say yes, that's the case. But logically, if you think about how we create antibodies and immunity, it's by being exposed to something. If you're not exposed to that, then you're not creating that. So logically, I would say that, yeah, definitely. And I would say that children, we haven't closed any schools here. So my daughter is still going to daycare, and they have put extreme restrictions on like when we pick up and drop off, so that we make sure that we adults don't interact. They're outside.
I lost my sound.
Are you there? Justin, can you hear me? Yeah, I can't hear you, Cam.
Okay. All right. So now let me ask you this. How do you feel based on what you guys did? You guys chose to not have a lockdown. Right. Apparently, it appears that you guys have had a worse situation than your neighbors have had. And the response to the response, how would you rate that? Has that been good? Are you guys ahead of the curve? Or are you behind the curve as far as you're seeing and what your leaders are pumping out there?
I think that they keep saying that we're supposed to reach a peak, like I said, at a certain point, and we haven't reached it at that point. That does not mean we won't reach a peak. Have we maybe possibly flattened the curve and pushed it forward? That could definitely be the case. Hopefully, we have made it so that we maybe keep a steady state instead of having these high peaks that Stockholm and Italy and Spain and have had. But yeah, it's super hard to say. I checked today, we have 25,265 cases 3,175 deceased, 1,672 that are in the ICU right now. Um, and yeah, so those are still quite high numbers for being such a small country, I think. So yeah.
So, what have been what is this the general sentiment there right now amongst the population? Is everybody sick and tired of it? Are they getting more afraid? Are they getting more brave? Taking it less serious, more serious? Because it seems to me like here in America, as we are flooded with information from everywhere, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or whatever, everyone has their own conspiracy theory, everyone has their own opinion, and that's great. I want to encourage that because I think that's how we all come up with different ideas and expand our thought process.
Right.
But it seems to be pitting people against one another, where
Yeah.
suddenly I hate you because you disagree with my point of view on the COVID virus. How are the Swedes handling that? What are you guys seeing a coming together or more of a separation?
I would say both. I would say we definitely have those who feel like, oh, well, this isn't going to happen to me, and I'm just going to keep living my life just like I always have been. I think on my Facebook, I've been super, super active, um, you know, just writing about how it's not for yourself that you need to do this. It's for other people. It's for your parents, and it's for us who are working on the front line. Because for us to be able to handle this, if it increases, we're barely hanging on right now. And by that, I mean, I don't mean that we don't have the ICU beds for the patients. I mean that we are already so extremely overworked and tired, and being stuck in those masks for 3 to 4 hours at a time is probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. And in Stockholm, they're stuck in those masks for 12, 13 hours at a time. So uh, for us to not end up there where I live, um, we of course want to encourage everybody to keep the restrictions, but we're definitely, yes, we're seeing that people are not following them, and it's a lot of it has to do with the weather. I know that sounds really stupid, but uh, people think that because you're outside you can't get sick and you can just hang out and do things as you normally do, and that's not the case. You still need to keep your distance from people and not see your parents and do
Now,
all those
what
things.
this is just a curiosity on my part because I don't know how you had said that you guys have regions, and I guess that
Yes.
would be like states, I guess,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
America,
yeah,
or okay. So
yeah,
in here in America, as you know, we've got governors that are doing things, we've got mayors that are doing
right,
things, we've got judges that are doing things. Is everything in Sweden happening at the top, or
yeah.
are the regions allowed to control some of this behavior?
Well, the regions are allowed to. Uh, they're not allowed to make their own restrictions and recommendations, if that's what you're asking. That's done by the government of Sweden. Um, they're allowed to make changes. Of course, you know, helping, like making sure that the hospitals have enough hospital beds, that we have enough personnel and stuff like that. But that's also done on the hospital levels, but they're not allowed to say, like, per region, you don't have your own rules. So the rules that are, or the restrictions or recommendations, they are for this whole country. It doesn't matter where you live.
What's the opinion of most of, or is it 50-50 that half of the population of Sweden says, I wish we were on lockdown, and half of them says, I wish we weren't? That, is that divided, or is it more of an 80-20, 70-30 thing?
I would say, and I'm just guessing, but I would say 80-20. I would say that most people are happy that we're not uh, locked down. Um, yeah, and I think most of that is because people are really scared what would happen when you take away the lockdown. There would be, I mean, from being, let's say, 50 people in the grocery store, you would have all of a sudden 150 at the same time, possibly. And I mean, Yeah, that just wouldn't be good. So I would think from people that I talk to and the people that I see, and which aren't many people, but uh, I still have a lot of friends and a big social network. And what we talk about at the hospital and stuff, it seems like people are happy that we didn't lock down. Um, and that, I hear a lot of comments that, yeah, Norway, you know, why did they do that when this is working better? And yeah, so yeah, I hope we're doing the right thing. I think that we are, as far as uh, the situation being a little bit better, and the immunity. Yeah, I definitely think that we did the
Now,
right thing.
what would be the general perception? Are you guys over there looking at Americans like we're a bunch of idiots, and the way we're reacting to this thing, not necessarily what a response is, but our response to the response, where people are infighting and we're attacking each other? I know that and again, you have a unique perspective on this because you've been both places. You've been uh, a Sweden in Sweden, and you've been a stupid American all at the same time. You've been able to live both lives. So what is the general perception over there of your fellow Americans, your fellow Auburn Tigers?
Well, I'm sure my fellow Auburn Tigers, they love just like me, I would hope. No, but honestly, Cam, I have to say, I know we don't want to have a political discussion because I usually don't discuss politics, but I would say that overall, since Trump became president, I would say that Swedish people uh, have lost a little bit of respect for Americans. I find myself defending my friends, you, and everybody that's watching this a lot, as far as how great I still think that America is, and what a wonderful place it is, and what a wonderful country, and what wonderful people live there. And so I think that during this, people have definitely reacted by, like you said, saying, yeah, stupid Americans. And but I think a lot of people aren't directing that at you guys. They're directing that at your government, and not at the individual. I think
Right.
people understand why you're reacting like this. If I'm having I'm having a hard time, just like everybody else. I think I'm super social. I have a lot of friends. I do a lot of things. And now I go to work. I come home. I spend time with my husband and my baby girl, which I absolutely love. We go outside, we go to the playground when I have my days off. Usually I see my parents every other day, maybe. We have coffee with them, or we do something before I go to work or after work. They live 10 minutes from us. I haven't seen them in 3 or 4 weeks. Uh, my brother and his family, I haven't seen them, and Zoe hasn't seen her only two cousins for a very long time. And so, yeah, I'm definitely struggling with that. So I think that um, we're all having a really hard time, even though we're not on lockdown. And I think being on lockdown would just be even worse. I think people have sympathy for you guys being angry, um, and especially at your politicians and people who are making decisions. I Of course, here, just like there, people are getting in fights and making nasty comments toward each other because we have a difference of opinion. I've had to block at least 10, 15 people on my Facebook because of what I've been writing about supporting us, and listening to the recommendations, and not going outside, and not having parties, and subjecting us to this if you don't have to. Uh, and yeah, so I think it's the same
Well,
everywhere, Cam.
I the thing that I love is that regardless of whether you and I agree or you agree with anybody here, you're willing to share your perspective. You're willing to come on here and talk to people and tell them what your reality is. And I think that oftentimes we talk at people and
Hmm.
tell them that they're stupid and you're wrong and I'm right and that sort of thing, as opposed to presenting your point of view and your life experience. And then from that, everyone can determine what it is that they want or or don't want to believe. I do have a couple of other questions that I want to throw out there, and I know I'm keeping you up late. I apologize, but
Oh no, it's fine.
everybody's really enjoying this. So
Yeah, I'm glad.
I'm going to give you both the questions at the same time, and you can answer them both.
Right.
How has the economy affected? Have you guys been taking an economic hit at all because you didn't go on lockdown? Because America's taken a huge economic hit, and are family members allowed to visit the hospital?
So the first question, yeah, we're definitely taking a huge, huge economic, uh, yeah, deficit. It's affecting everything, and that is, I can honestly tell you, I have a lot of people, a lot of friends that I know, that have restaurants, that work at bars, that are entertainers, just like you, Cam, that haven't been able to play and do that kind of things, and we've had uh, heated discussions. Um, Whereas they feel like I don't understand that they need to do different kind of things to be able to survive, and I am totally understandable to that. Um, but I am also, it's gonna sound, this is gonna sound so horrible and harsh, but when we've had these discussions, I've several times also lost my cool and said that I feel like human life is more important than money. And I know that that's a horrible thing to say because people might end up, um, without, or they're going to end up jobless and maybe homeless and all. And that's definitely not what I want for anybody. But I feel it's important that we still do everything that we can to get rid of this, because if we don't do it now, it's just going to keep going. So yeah, but we're definitely taking a come up. Mickey doesn't know if he'll still have his job at the end of this year. Um, yeah, a lot of my friends are out of jobs. A lot of them have been sent home, some with pay, some with not. Yeah, definitely
Now,
economic hit.
we something that happened here was, we started printing money. We started printing $100 bills and just mailing them to everybody. Basically, hey, you're out of work, so we're going to take care of you. Did anything like that occur there? Did your all's government step in with any financial relief for individuals that are having a
Yeah,
problem?
yeah, for sure. Very early, they stepped in for. Um, so let me back up a little bit. We when this started, we have spring break here in Sweden. The different regions we have. Uh, Let me see. So I say this. I think we have 4 or 6 weeks where we have the different regions has spring break, and this all starting during that time. And Sweden is a huge skiing country, so we all go north to all these ski places, huge uh, ski resorts. And that was one of the biggest things. Is they didn't close those down at first, and then they decided to close it down at the end of March. We were actually all taking a trip, 26 of us from the ICU where I work, over a weekend to go skiing, and that didn't happen because they decided to close. And that place was in Norway, so they closed first. Um, and so yeah, so from the very beginning, they did give money to the restaurant business or the um, that type of aid. Today, just before this on the news, I saw that today that they had given, I don't remember how many millions it was, to the arts and uh, theater departments across the country, of because they've been losing a lot of money to shows and things like that. So yeah, they've definitely stepped up, um, trying to provide for them as well, which is also, this is always a discussion here, Cam. Even though we have a free healthcare system, we don't get paid very much. I have gone to school for, I've gone to the university for 4 years, and my brother, who's a carpenter, made more money right out of high school than I did. Um, and so that's always a big thing here. And one of the things that we're really seeing here in Sweden, and I wrote a Facebook, I wrote on my Facebook very early on, um, directed to our politicians, that you're thanking us now, but where are you when we really need you? Where are you every other day of the year when we take care of sick patients and save their lives, and when we battle other types of diseases, which we do every day in the ICU? Um, where are you then, and why are you only supporting us now? Because you need us now. And that actually
Let
got
me
published in a couple of papers, so I'm happy about
Great.
that.
So now you got black helicopters over the house, right? So Mickey's out back having to guard against a military attack. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, it does not surprise me that someone that is in the business of saving lives, that is the priority. And the fact that you have just pointed out that being in the healthcare business in Sweden is not about getting rich. It's about sincerely helping people, and I think that is so unbelievably admirable. I do want to ask you this because there's been a lot of comparisons made, and I don't know where you were during this period of time, but were you guys affected by the H1N1, the swine flu
Yes.
outbreak that happened? How does that compare? Because I know that a lot of people are comparing that. What was the difference in what you guys saw and how you guys had to handle that?
Right. So remember how I said that I don't take a flu shot? That is the only time that I actually took a flu shot because they recommended it to all of us who worked. But I was not working in the ICU then, but it was not at all like this. They talked about it here. We had some cases, and unfortunately, we've had, I think it's 10 or 15 cases where people who took the vaccine have this sleeping disorder now. And uh, have actually been reimbursed by our government now, just like a few years ago, because they had received because they're sick from taking the swine flu vaccine. And but yeah, it was nothing like this, Kim. Nothing at all. I don't even remember hearing more about it, except that we took the vaccine, and yeah, but it was nothing like this at all.
Well, I don't remember it either. And
Yeah.
I know that it happened and it was brought up.
Thank you, Scott.
I started to look back and I couldn't see the hysteria, the outrage, and that sort of thing. And so I would, yeah, I wanted to ask you that question: how you guys dealt
Yeah.
with that there, if it was anywhere comparable in any
No.
fashion at all. So,
No. Can I ask you
you
something?
absolutely.
We missed I missed the question. You had a two-part question, and I only answered the first part,
Oh,
but I don't remember the
yeah,
second part.
yes. The second that is very important. Thank you for reminding me. Can families visit the hospital of sick patients because you can't hear?
No. And so here's what we've done. Very early on, our chief our chief uh, doctors and our bosses came to us and said that one of the hardest things that we were going to have to deal with during this time is that we won't be able to provide the care, the level of care that we usually do. And when you work in the ICU, you not only take care of critically ill patients, you take care of their families or their close relatives. It's one thing that I am extremely proud of, that we all do such a good job at, because when their loved ones are on a ventilator, it's as much about taking care of them as it is taking care of whoever's in that bed. And very early on, they said that we were going to have to uh, only do uh, what we can, that we are not going to be able to do the extra things that we always do and try to do, that we might have so many patients that we just have to do what's necessary to keep them alive, and that ethically we were going to have a hard time with this, and we were also going to feel like we weren't doing enough, even though we are. And one of the hardest things about that was that the families of these patients do not get to visit them. When we had only a few patients at the beginning, uh, they said that they could come once and use our um, our protective gear, and go into the room and be with them. But very quickly, they realized that would not hold. It wouldn't work in the long run because we need all the equipment that we can get. There's a lot of material that gets used, even though we do our best to not change out of it so much. So yeah, that is one of the hardest things that is during this time, is that these patients have us. They don't have their usual support system. They don't even get to feel the touch of a hand. They get to feel the touch of a glove. Normally, when we have sick patients, you grab their hand several times when we wash them, and whatever we do, when we brush their hair, or whatever we do, taking care of them, they feel warmth in our hands, and that somebody's there, and also their loved ones can sit next to them and hold their hand. And in this, they can't. We walk around in these spacesuits, and they don't get any human contact as far as being touched, which we know is something that speeds up recovery. So
Wow.
it's
The
tough.
the thing that I really, really, really appreciate and love about this interview, I guess you could call it, it's more of just a discussion amongst a couple of friends that other people are watching, is that we are seeing a compassionate side of this that we don't see, because it's always somebody online shouting and screaming about it's not true, or shouting and screaming about you're an idiot, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. But in the end, ultimately, there are people who are sick.
Yeah.
Ultimately, there are people that you are charged with doing the very best that you can to nurse back to health under a situation where there's a psychological component, where I know that the few times that I've ever been in the hospital, I've always wanted mom there. And there's just a certain, there's just a certain comfort in having that individual that helps give you strength. And you are having to surrogate that. You guys are having to step in and provide the comfort. And just, I can see in your face, and I know that people watching here can as well, the emotion that is associated with having to deal with this, regardless of the economic problem and the political issue and the media. There legitimately are people that are sick and are dying, and you're trying to fix them. And I'm just, I mean, literally, I'm sitting here and I'm getting chills watching you describe how that, I mean, how drained are you when you come home? I mean, it's got to be, you've got to be just drained completely.
Yeah.
Physically
completely.
and emotionally.
Yeah. And I mean, normally it's quite draining to work in an ICU. But this is, I don't think any of us could have even imagined what this would be like. It's draining on a level that I can't describe. And somehow, I still have so much energy to go back and do it again. I don't know where that comes from. It's probably some drive that we all have. I don't know, but
it's not financial, though. You've already pointed that out, right?
No, and if I don't get a raise after this, Cam, I don't know.
You can be a tennis pro. You'll be Bjorn Borg. No such thing. There's no such. You stop saying. You're stepping on my toes, Geetha.
I know.
Hey, and you know what? Real quick, I need to do this because you and I had an interaction. So anybody that's ever been to Geetha's page, she has a little weird thing over the R in her name. And so I sent her a message.
It's over the E.
Over the E, excuse me. And she had to pronounce it for me. So I want to try it. So her last name in America as a redneck could be Noren.
Yes.
But you got to roll it. It's Noren. Correct? Is that true? Do I get it right?
Yeah. Noren.
I mean, and it's fun to say. I mean, I hope that from all of the amazing things that we have shared here today, when people leave here, that Noren is just rolling off their tongue, because it really is a fun thing to say. I do want to, and I've got a couple more questions, and I'll let you go. And again, I appreciate you
let me go. I'm fine.
Okay, I appreciate you staying up late.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm always up late.
I want to point out the fact too. I think there was a lot of people that tuned in today, and they had a certain
thank you, Lisa,
expectation that this was going to deteriorate into some type of a political
Mhm.
discussion. And and that's not at all what this was ever supposed to be.
No.
And I want to point out the fact that it's not. What this is, it's an opportunity for you to tell us your point of view. This is not about you telling anybody that they're stupid. It's not me telling anybody that they're stupid. It's about you telling what your reality is. And I think that is so critically important. And as I read
Me
the
too.
comments come in, and I know that there are a lot of people on both sides of this debate, and everybody has been so wonderful, and it just, everyone has been of goodwill that is watching this, and they're so inspired by your story regardless of how they feel about the response on this thing. So I want to thank the viewers for being so polite and understanding what we're trying to do here. We're trying to express an individual that is out there trying to save lives. She's not waving a political flag. She is not trying to tell you that you're right or wrong. She is literally holding the hands of people who are dying. So it's time for some bad news. Of the people that are coming in that you're seeing, how many have you lost? And what does that feel like?
Uh, so I'm pretty sure, Cameron, that I am not allowed to say that
Okay.
uh, in exact numbers. We also have something like HIPAA here,
Okay.
but uh, it's always, let me just say this. It's always hard to lose a patient. It can be different degrees of hard depending on what the patient's. I mean, if the patient's older, I'm not saying it gets easier because it doesn't, but um, there is always a different degree of difficulty. And again, the difficulty here is that uh, we feel inadequate. We feel like we haven't given the best care that we could have, that we usually do. We haven't been able to have these sit down meetings and conversation with their families. We haven't held their hand uh, because we might not have had time because we have to move on to the next patients just to keep them alive. Uh, so yeah, patients dying is never easy, but here it's even harder.
So, so let me, if you don't mind, because I think this is a reality that maybe many of the people here don't know and never get to see, and without disobeying the HIPAA as we call it, give us an idea of what it's like from a patient's journey. So someone is at home. I got the fever. I think I got this. Do they come in? Do they collapse on the floor? Do they come in on a gurney?
Yeah.
Do they come in healthy and rapidly deteriorate? Take us through that process so it's real for people. You know, what's
Right.
it like to see from beginning to recovery or expiration, I guess you could say.
Right. So, what we've seen here is that the patients that we have, they are not being admitted directly to us to the ICU. They are being admitted to our epidemic ward first. And what we're seeing, and what the infectious disease doctors have noted, is that uh, on day 10, 11 through 14, 15 is where the peak of the disease is, where the patients are most critical, usually. Um, and let me just say, with the regular flu, um, it's a much shorter time period that we're talking time frame that we're talking about that people are sick, but they also usually have a peak, and then it goes down, but the peak is small. And here it seems that we have an uphill, and then we have a peak, and the peak stays for a very long time until it goes. So what we're seeing is, um, like usual, and Cam, you're probably gonna have an opinion about this, but I'm just saying it because it's true. But unfortunately, it is a fact that men stay home way too long before they seek healthcare. I don't know if it's like that in the U.S., but we have definitely
I'll
seen
agree
that
with
here.
that. I'll agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like that when with the regular flu too. So when they do seek care, they often end up in the ICU right away on a ventilator because they're so sick. So what we're seeing here is that uh, most of these patients are men. Now, I looked on the ICU website, and apparently the women have caught up a bit, but most of the patients are still men. And but what we're seeing is, yeah, they're going to the ER. They've been home for usually a week to 10 days with a fever, hoping it will pass. And what ends up happening is they come to the ER because they have such shortness of breath or chest pains or something like that. Um, and luckily, they haven't been admitted to the ICU right away, all of them. They've been able to go to the regular ward, and we've treated them with other types of breathing machines there. But around that 10 to 14 day span, somewhere in there, unfortunately, they need ICU care and being on a ventilator. So then they come to us. Um, and the problem that we're having here, and I'm sure you guys are seeing that too, is that even though there isn't a steady admittance of ICU patients every day, the problem is that they need care for such a long time, 3 to 4 weeks. So they don't ever leave. So it just keeps filling up. And that's the biggest problems. And like I said before, uh, our boss actually told us the other day that a median time frame for the normal ICU patient to be in the ICU is apparently 4 to 5 days where they're critical, and what we're seeing now is up to 2 to 3 weeks. Um, what we're seeing is complete loss of muscle function, which happens depending on how old you are and such and how much muscle you have. That can happen after the first week in normal cases as well. And one of the biggest problems we're having now is making sure that we have wards that are also staffed enough to be able to rehabilitate these patients. They have been in a bed for 3 to 4 weeks, sedated, heavily sedated. Um, we've they've maybe had we have found, I think this is scientifically proven that um, having ICU patients on their stomach is beneficial when you have a lung problem, and so that's the case here as well. Uh, but yeah, it's a long process, and
Uh,
for those who have made it, this process isn't over once you wake up. Um, this is something that they're going to have to live with for 6 months to a year, most likely, if they
um,
survive.
I've got another uncomfortable question, but I think it's important for people to understand what it is that you're seeing with your own eyes out there on the front lines. Is there a point, and this has got to be so devastating to a person whose job is to save life? Is there a point where you can tell that it's the point of no return, even though someone may not succumb to it, but where you can kind of tell they're too far gone? Does that happen? And does it happen much? And how do you guys deal with that?
So, I mean, that happens normally as well. Um, and the thing about this is that because we know that it's the virus that's making him this sick, and we know that from experience now, or the little experience that we have with it, and that what we've learned from the other countries and from Stockholm, who have had more patients than us, is that we know that patients can get better. So we have had patients that we have said 5, 6 days in a row that they won't be here at the end of the day. They won't be here tomorrow, and we have been surprised that they actually last. So because it's the virus that's affecting them. Uh, yeah, it's we have patients every day that are at that point. Uh, yeah,
And with that,
I
and that leads me to another question on that same topic. If how how important do you think it would be for a person in that period of the disease, to have the emotional support from, I'm getting very philosophical here and very spiritual here, but I know that people can reach down deep and they can channel energy from other things and other energy sources. So do you think that these critically ill patients should be allowed to have that emotional therapy that would come along with loved ones coming in? Or are they so sedated they wouldn't even know?
Yeah, so here's the thing, that they are so sedated that we don't think that they know. Now, we always, when we have sedated patients, we always talk to them like they can hear us, and we have had many patients say that they have heard bits and pieces. But yeah, they are heavily sedated, much more so than maybe usually. Um, and so I think it's so hard to know, but uh, there was a hospital um, that had in the ward, not the ICU, but that had started drawing happy faces on their face masks, and they had seen a difference in those patients because they could just see somebody smiling, even though it wasn't somebody smiling, but it had actually made a difference. So, um, yeah, it's hard to know if they would benefit from. They would definitely benefit from it when they are at the stage where we have taken them off the vent, and they are awake, but they're still in the ICU because they need to be. Uh, they would definitely benefit from that, and they would.
I,
Me just being able to take off my glove, like I would usually do, I think would also be super, beneficial. But we can't. We can't. I can't take anything off at all within these
I,
zones.
I know that, again, from my limited personal sickness experience, that oftentimes emotional treatment is very effective. And
Yeah.
I can only imagine, and based on how emotional you've been talking about these situations and how passionate you obviously are and compassionate, that you would probably agree that it's a shame that that element of the treatment process can't be done at this point,
Right.
and it could
Right.
possibly be extremely effective at
Right.
giving these people some of that strength that that's gone
Right.
because of the situation.
Right.
Um, wow. I mean, I had intended on this going about 45 minutes, and here we are at an hour and a half. Everybody has hung with us. The
Yeah.
comments have been great. Everybody just been,
Thank
and I
you.
tell you, you're a rock star at this point, and I want to encourage
Thanks. So are
everybody.
you.
Yeah, hardly. I want to encourage everybody to find Gita Noren on
Nice.
Facebook and friend her and understand, now you understand this individual and where she's coming from, what her point of view is, what her life experience is, and now you can understand why you believe the things that you believe. And that's so important. It's so
Right.
critically to understand where a person's point of view actually comes from. If it's different, that's fine. I never ever want to stifle someone's point of view or someone's opinion or belief because it's coming from, I think, an honest place. And
Right.
whether you and I disagree about anything, whether it's football, college football, or tennis, or healthcare, or politics, it doesn't matter because you are
Right.
an amazing, wonderful individual that
Thank you.
this world is better because you are here. And
You're gonna
your
make me cry.
family is, no, I'm not. Your family is so blessed to have you. And I have a
Thank you.
strong suspicion that, yeah, someone just referred me as the stupid cover band singer. I love that. Brian's a friend. I know he doesn't mean it. Uh, and I have a feeling that we're going to do this again. And we're gonna
Yeah.
talk more about this. And I hope that you're up for it, staying up
Oh
late.
yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
hope
I'm
Mickey
always up
doesn't
late.
mind. I
He
hope
went
I
to
hope that
bed
Mickey.
before we started.
Oh yeah, well that is wonderful, and love to Zoe and to your
Thank you.
parents and
Thank
and
you.
all that wonderful stuff. So hey everybody, thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Geeta, is there anything else that you would just like to say, whether it's War Eagle or anything else? Just let
Well,
the folks
always
that are
War
watching.
Eagle. But I want to say, uh, like Cam has pointed out several times, I've said stupid things to friends of mine, I'm sure, and to other people, and I've been maybe harsh in trying to get my point across as well. And it sounds like a cliche, but be kind to each other and respect each other's opinions and do what Cam and I did today with all of you and just have a conversation and try to have better understanding for each other because we all need to come together to make this go away. And the only way to do that is together. And we're stronger in numbers, right, Cam?
Yes, we absolutely are. And again, as long as we come together in good faith,
Yeah.
we can find common ground and we can figure things out together. It's like we want to battle one another. It's so everybody wants to be right, wants to be right, wants to be right. And my experience
Tack
is
Sophia.
different than Lisa's or than Vic's or Kimberly's or Lady J's or different than yours. And but when we all get together, it's really weird how suddenly we're a lot more similar than we are different.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I think that we get behind our keyboards and get behind our opinions, and then we realize, holy cow! And we get to hear from someone like you that is out there saving lives. That is what you do every single day, and get to hear that perspective, and especially someone from that's a totally different country, but
right.
Where what I love about this is that you are also American. And so you have a foot in both countries. So you understand this culture, you understand that culture. And so that brings a really, really neat perspective to this conversation. And I could not imagine a better first guest for this.
Thank
and
you.
thank you for
Cam.
letting me get outside my lane today and talk about you inside your lane. So
thank you so
awesome.
much.
Geetha, get some sleep and keep saving lives over there, girl.
Thank you, everybody.
And we'll do this again. Thank you.
Yeah, we will. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, guys. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed that. I know that I really, really enjoyed doing it. This has been something that I've wanted to do for some time, and I got to do it today, and Geetha was a wonderful first guest, and I hope that you guys got to hear some things and maybe have a kind of a different perspective on what you believe. If it changed your mind, that's great. If it didn't change your mind, that is great too. This is not about changing minds. This is about having a conversation and recognizing someone else's point of view in a friendly environment where we're not shouting at each other, but we're discussing. And if there's one thing that I think everybody here today can agree upon, is that there are people out there that are saving lives of people that are legitimately sick. And that sickness is not the result of anything political. That sickness is not the result of anything that a governor or a mayor did. It's people that are honestly sick. And thank God for people like Geetha who are willing to get up every single day and go out there and hold those hands and take care and hopefully have a greater success rate than failure rate. And I have a feeling that that's what's going on. So, man, I hope you guys will share this. I hope you'll like it. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to more comments coming in, and we're going to do this again really soon. Dustin, you still back there? Thank you, Dustin, for all of your help and for making this. And Geetha, I can still see you, so I'm waving at you right now. And bring Geetha back up one more time, Dustin, so she can wave at everybody. Thank you so very much.
I was reading all the comments. Thank you so much.
Yes, and we will talk soon. Be safe.
Yeah, we will. You too. All right. Bye, guys.
Signing off. See you guys. Thank you so much.
See ya.